I can't believe it, it's already been a month since The Evil Within 2 came out. Are you still playing it? Well, I'm not. I would have completely forgotten about this game if I didn't have to spend a whole month dwelling on it for this review. This review may come across a bit biased, considering it's coming from a fairly big fan of the original game as well as survival horror in general. The Evil Within built up very high expectations for its sequel. I was under the impression that The Evil Within 2 would be filled with the same amount of polish and heart that the original had. So throughout this review, I cannot help but compare The Evil Within 2 to its predecessor, and the other games just like it. Hopefully in using this style, you can get into my mindset when going into the game. You can see what's different for better or for worse. And let me tell ya, everything about the sequel is different from the first game, which is fine if you're a fan of more modern game mechanics with a simplified approach, a more mainstream focus, but disappointing if you prefer a more innovative approach to horror, like the first game had. So, I must admit, I was pretty hyped in the week leading up to The Evil Within 2. I wasn't expecting the first game to be made into a series until the surprise reveal during Bethesda's E3 showcase. It was quite a lovely shock, especially considering it had a release date of Friday the 13th. I was like, what? That's like 2 days from now. It came as quite a surprise considering there was nothing but minor rumors of a sequel circulating. The game literally released only 4 months after its initial E3 announcement, which wasn't that long, and its debut trailer was nothing short of captivating with its nod to the HBO series Westworld, with the white milky stuff. Is it just me, or are these era-bending remixes of songs becoming popular these days? I had to be the first kid on YouTube to comment that I was listening to the original song before all the other popular kids did. The trailer kinda reminded me of Resident Evil 7's version of Go Tell Aunt Rhody, but it also felt rather cryptic in presentation akin to Death Stranding in its trailers. This got me so hyped that I was even playing through the first game again in anticipation, hoping that the second game would live up to the original. Wouldn't you know it, Friday the 13th eventually rolled around and I popped in The Evil Within 2. After a long 2 chapters of running through corridors and set pieces,
What the hell?
I grew incredibly impatient and bored, frustrated with the overall direction that Tango decided to take with this game. Even after getting into the meat of the game, the open world sections, my heart continued to sink. No matter what I did, I could not enjoy this game. I was expecting The Evil Within 2 to be a decent game that I could quickly praise in a review and make helpful content in regards to. I expected to be able to learn more and more details on each and every playthrough.
What in the hell?
The ambiguous plotline of the first game was mysterious and fun to dissect.
Why would they catch you instead of just killing you?
Maybe he didn't see me as a threat.
It was especially fun to go through and find hidden Easter eggs and secrets. I enjoyed every second of exploration in pursuit of the hidden map pieces and locker keys. Unfortunately, the second game lacked the charm of the original and fell short of any expectations I once had. It felt like a below-average attempt at a mainstream zombie shooter with a blatant story, poor pacing, and cliché horror. The game is also mechanically broken, with minor bugs and game-breaking glitches throughout. Buggy AI.
Gotta be more careful with these things.
Bad, jumpy animations. Clipping issues. And many other strange happenings. I inadvertently devoted a whole day to posting video clips of these various bugs on Twitter. I swear, I didn't do this intentionally to smear the game. I just needed others to see what I was going through. Turns out, I'm the only person on the planet who was having a bad time with this game. Many of you have come forward to tell me that you haven't encountered anything remotely like what I was experiencing. Many of you also came to inform me that The Evil Within 2 is a great game. I went online to discover many baffling positive reviews. I even began to wonder if I was even playing the same game as everyone else. I even mentioned on Twitter that I felt like I got a beta version of the game. Even if we set aside all the bugs and glitches, this still would have been an unremarkable game, and a terrible sequel at that. I wanted the game everyone else was playing and enjoying, not whatever this is. I cannot even begin to express my overall disappointment I have with the various changes to the game's design, such as, but not limited to, the gameplay, atmosphere, graphics, and story. I feel like there's not even a single redeemable quality to this game. I almost wonder if the sequel is a product of the unfair, harsh criticisms the first game received due to it being such a gigantic deviation from the original formula. The core emphasis on strategy and survival has changed drastically, making it too much like other third-person shooters. Tango Gameworks, who surprisingly developed both the first and second game, went with a more mainstream approach this time around, redacting their original gameplay design and building a new one from the ground up, resulting in something that leans more towards action than strategy. Yeah, there's some strategy in this game, but not nearly as much as before. Whether or not a larger focus on action is a good thing is dependent on you and what you get out of games, and whether or not you enjoy this game is dependent on how you play it, and how familiar you are with more mainstream games. It also depends on if you like the original game's trial and error gameplay or overall design. Though it was flawed, to me, it was ultimately perfect. Nothing about the original game stood out as something that needed to be changed entirely. It just needed a little spit shine, and not this obnoxious overhaul that it ended up getting. In 2014, The Evil Within came out as an expansion of the survival horror genre, taking the familiar and highly regarded Resident Evil 4 formula and putting a tense, deadly, and cerebral spin on it. Survival horror pioneer Shinji Mikami, responsible for the Resident Evil series, was the director of The Evil Within. The last horror game he directed was Resident Evil 4, 9 years before The Evil Within even came out. Needless to say, his reputation, along with his return to this over-the-shoulder survival horror genre, easily built up high expectations for the first game. Just like many survival horror masterpieces before it, it was heavily criticized for its various flaws and deliberate, sometimes frustrating controls and design. The game was built around trial and error and really pushed the limits in difficulty, which was challenging and fun to some, irritating and sluggish to others. Many dove into The Evil Within with the expectation that it would play similarly to Resident Evil 4, with its more arcade-like, run-and-gun style of gameplay. That is rather understandable considering that at first glance, the presentation of The Evil Within is very similar to Resident Evil 4. The game features a plethora of traps, relentless enemies, and more sluggish controls in order to encourage the player to be more methodical about their approach to various situations. Shinji Mikami stepped down as director with The Evil Within 2 and became the producer instead. Mikami basically told us his main focus was on the studio's operations. His involvement in the sequel is minimal, but he did suggest you could find some of his influences here and there. He handed the directorial role to John Johannes, to which he praised for his talent. This time around, the game's script was written by a Hollywood screenplay author by the name of Trent Haga, who all I really know him for is Dead Girl, that effed up movie. And he's also an actor.
Where's your computer? I know you got a laptop. What is going on? I'm sorry. We need to have a look at your computer, your laptop, your telephone, your Xbox.
On the other hand, somebody no one really even knows, Itaru Yokoyama, wrote the first game. In summary, The Evil Within's creative direction shifted from a Japanese perspective to an American perspective with the Japanese filter.
What the hell?
I could certainly feel the difference when playing The Evil Within 2. In the visuals and gameplay, I couldn't help but get Silent Hill Downpour vibes. And in the monster designs, I kept getting Silent Hill Homecoming flashbacks. Those who have followed me for a very long time may already know that those games are American-developed sequels to Japanese-developed games, and the cultural differences do show, especially with The Evil Within 2. As I feel all good survival horror games should, the original game has plenty of strategy. For one, there's the ability to burn down enemies with a limited number of matches. When timed correctly, a match can burn multiple enemies within the radius of the induced flame. These matches defy physics by having the ability to engulf enemies in flames without a flammable substance, unlike real matches that spark and burn my finger only to immediately go out. Despite how any of that works, it does add a vital amount of strategy to the gameplay. What also adds strategy are these mini traps littered throughout each chapter. Trust me, these traps will completely and utterly destroy you if you're not paying close enough attention to what's going on around you. The Evil Within teaches you to be wary of your environment at all times using these traps. The game always changed it up frequently to prevent you from getting too familiar with them. No barreling through levels without encountering avoidable death. The explosive tripwire is the most common trap, but there's a whole variety of different kinds of traps that encourage you to mix up your strategy and always be on your guard. Between the enemies and traps, you'll become a splattering mass of body parts if you let your guard down. Just don't lose your head over it, as these environmental deaths are escapable. Just use your head. You can choose to disarm traps for weapon parts or cleverly use them against your foes, sacrificing the weapon parts. The challenge in horror comes from avoiding death, thus creating tension. It's fairly diverse in the number of ways you can go about playing it. Make a bold and daring decision, or go with the more methodical route for what works best in the heat of the moment. The game is all about risk, and with risk, you are rewarded. Just don't be stupid and charge headlong into enemy encounters or traps you'll have no chance of surviving. Regarding The Evil Within 2, you'll rarely come across any traps. It wasn't until someone pointed out the traps to me that I realized that the game did indeed contain traps. Thanks, Rain. The only time I recall encountering any was in Chapter 5 during the first real boss fight of the game, and they only brought back the tripwire. I was surprised to see them. The stasis traps can prove useful as long as you don't get caught within it. There are also some environmental traps found throughout the world. Using water to your advantage, you can stun multiple enemies for a short period of time using an electric bolt, giving you just enough time to fire off a couple of shots, not really much. There's also the oil drums that you can kick over to spill out and ignite, but considering fire doesn't instantly kill enemies this time around, they will continue barging towards you while in flames. Nearly all environmental traps in the game require some sort of follow-up with a gun, making them work more as a distraction to the enemies. The way stamina was integrated into the first game also created an extra layer of strategy, as you always had to be aware of your limits. Though, silly to say, I enjoyed that if I ran too long, I'd stop moving completely, as it does add to the strategy. If you're not paying attention and allow this gauge to run out, you'll stop dead in your tracks, resulting in a panic-stricken moment as enemies get closer and closer, ready to tear you into pieces. In the sequel, you aren't penalized for running out of stamina, you simply just drunk walk, moving no slower than the standard jog, which is fast enough to get by nearly every enemy in the game, no matter what the difficulty. There's no repercussion for overusing it besides inconveniencing you by making you move slower than you'd like. Once I figured out that I could save ammunition by just running by every enemy, I took advantage of it. You can run by every enemy in the game without a problem, though the ankle biters can be a problem. Just shoot them down and keep running, or walking, or jogging, or whatever you want to call it. This use of strategy and insane difficulty is what made The Evil Within stand out from the crowd. When you use strategy through a combination of sneak kills, burning bodies, traps, and single-use items, you are rewarded in the satisfaction of knowing that you're playing a difficult video game well. It's the same kind of satisfaction you get in Dark Souls when defeating a tough boss without taking any damage. It's an adrenaline rush through extreme tension and hardship. I feel it's this strategy and sheer difficulty that makes the first game as good as it is. The second game utterly lacks strategy and difficulty. The crazy awesome kills you used to get by being clever are a thing of the past. Forget about hiding and blind fire, that is, if you cared about those things. You liked burning bodies to rid them for good? Well, too bad. You like being able to smack and stomp enemies whenever you want? Not gonna happen.
What the?
But that's not saying they didn't add a few new things, such as the ability to shoot while crouched. You couldn't do that before. There's a new cover system, vastly improved upon from the Kidman DLC. You can now go around objects and jet from cover to cover. It's nice, but it's a bit finicky at times and doesn't always work when you need it to. The cover system in the original game was integrated into the crouch button. It was subtle, but at least you were in complete control of it. Another nice touch added to The Evil Within 2 is the fluid animation of pulling out a knife just before a sneak kill. I did really like that. Unfortunately, the removal and addition of these features makes the game far less difficult. Even on the hardest difficulties, I rarely found myself worried about my survival.
Oh no.
I never felt challenged. And it has nothing to do with what difficulty you choose to start the game on. Both the Evil Within games have 4 difficulty options. In the second game, there's Casual, Survival, Nightmare, and Classic. The latter you unlock after beating the game. The game has no problem making it clear through the description of each difficulty that Nightmare difficulty is the equivalent to normal difficulty of the first game. I tend to disagree. I think Nightmare difficulty is more similar to the original's Casual. But even then, the game is not nearly as hard as it was not designed to be hard. The difficulty seemingly doesn't affect much beyond the enemy's ability to take and deal damage. I believe more zombies appear on harder difficulties as well. There are subtle changes, but nothing I saw is an added obstacle. For example, the enemy awareness does change slightly. No matter what the difficulty, if you get caught, the enemy roars, giving you a head start to get far enough away from it just to have it forget all about you.
These things are piling corpses up.
In the first game, that increase in awareness makes a huge difference. When you get caught, the enemies will start running towards you, leaving you with the only option to fight. The enemies rarely give up on their chase for you. They'll do a damn good job trying to find you. Enemies are far more responsive and quicker to attack. Their movement speed increases, forcing you to think faster. As if Nightmare difficulty wasn't enough, you could unlock Akumu difficulty. That is sure to get your heart racing. It's almost impossible. It is probably the hardest thing I've ever encountered in a survival horror game. It is the ultimate test in skills you may have mastered throughout it. Unlike the second game's classic difficulty, which is just basically Nightmare difficulty with a bunch of irritating and strict limitations. All in all, The Evil Within 2 is the first game redacted. It was designed to appeal to the common folk. It has a narrative-driven story people can understand without thinking too hard.
Son of a bitch! Out of sight, out of mind. You did. You did. Didn't you? Oh, you were never out of my mind. I hope you're proud of yourselves.
You did this to us!
A simple control scheme commonly accepted in most third-person games, automation, leniency in mechanics to reward the player even for playing badly, backpedaling of the overabundant use of various gruesome ways to die, removing the trial and error aspect.
Shit!
Long story short, it eliminates many mechanics from the first game that made it a fun and challenging game that encourages you to use your mind in order to deal with each and every situation thrown at you. And I haven't even scratched the surface of it yet. In the next few parts of this review, I will break down and analyze the gameplay and story. I decided it would be best to start breaking up longer videos into parts in order to get content out quicker. In this way, I can put out videos as I work on them, and at the same time give you something to look forward to regularly. So stay connected on Twitter, Facebook, or even Discord, and be on the lookout for part 2 of this 3-part review. I realize some of you may have been wondering where I've been. I did recently make a big move, and it took some time getting adjusted. I want to thank all my loyal patrons for sticking with me through this content drought, especially these new patrons. Hey, look at that, Sigma Undine came back. Thanks for that. Tulio Marcos upped his pledge. Maybe it was a little incentive for me to hurry on up. I have 2 brand new patrons, Daniel Molina and Kenny Roberts. You guys are highborn now, or born high. And as always, a special thanks to the following champions: the legendary Rain and Michael, the heroic Tyler Hunter in Sigma Undine, the elite Yortores Yartarson, Born to Die 3, and Miami Ink Vampire. You guys are awesome! So, since this is going to be an ongoing review, you could kill some time by checking out my complete review of RE7. Consider becoming a patron like the other kind champion folk that I previously mentioned. You would be supporting my dream. I always dreamed I'd be a content creator on YouTube.